People don't use you because they hate you. They use you because your presence makes it easy. That sentence might sting, not because it's cruel, but because it's accurate. Exploitation is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself. It slips in quietly, through routine, familiarity, and unguarded access. It shows up as expectations you never agreed to, favors that slowly become obligations, emotional labor you didn't offer, but somehow provide. And most of the time, you don't notice it happening. You just feel tired, drained, slightly invisible, slightly resentful, but unable to point to a single moment where it went wrong. Here's the uncomfortable truth dark psychology reveals. People don't decide to use you. They adapt to the signals you emit. Human beings are pattern readers. They subconsciously track who explains, who overextends, who stays available, who absorbs pressure without resistance. And once those patterns are clear, behavior adjusts automatically, not out of malice, but efficiency. This is why confrontation rarely fixes exploitation. Saying stop addresses behavior, not the signal underneath it. If the signal remains, a new form of usage replaces the old one. Different face. Same dynamic. Quiet power works in the opposite direction. It doesn't ask to be treated differently. It removes the conditions that made misuse possible in the first place. And the moment those conditions disappear, something strange happens. People either recalibrate their behavior or drift away without conflict. No speech, no drama, no explanation. That moment is what this video is about. If you've ever felt like people take more than they give, if you've noticed that your kindness turns into expectation, if you sense that others cross lines you never clearly drew, this isn't about becoming colder. It's about becoming contained. Before we go deeper, pause for 1 second. If content like this sharpens how you see people and yourself, stay with the channel. Not for motivation, not for noise, but for clarity that doesn't beg to be heard. Now let's examine why people keep using you, and the one internal shift that makes it stop permanently. People don't wake up planning to take advantage of you. That idea is comforting because it keeps the problem external. Villains, narcissists, toxic people. But psychology points somewhere more unsettling. Exploitation begins as a response, not an intention. It forms when your behavior consistently communicates access without cost. And the most dangerous part is this: those signals are usually invisible to the person sending them. From a dark psychology perspective, human interaction is less about morality and more about efficiency. People unconsciously seek the path of least resistance. They invest where there is friction, and they extract where there is none. This is not cruelty. It is adaptive behavior. The mind scans for patterns, tests limits softly, and adjusts. When no resistance appears, the behavior stabilizes. Over time, what began as a small favor becomes a role. What felt like kindness becomes an unspoken obligation. The signal often starts with availability. Not physical presence, but psychological availability. You respond quickly. You listen deeply. You anticipate needs. You explain yourself. You soften discomfort before it fully forms. On the surface, these look like virtues, and they are internally. But externally, repeated without containment, they create a predictable pattern. Predictability is useful. Useful things get used. Another signal is emotional transparency without regulation. You share your thoughts openly. You process feelings aloud. You reveal confusion, guilt, uncertainty in real time. Again, honesty is not weakness, but uncontained honesty creates leverage. When others can track your emotional state easily, they don't need to ask. They adjust their behavior to it. Some will accommodate, others will exploit. Both are responding to information you provided freely. Then there is over-explanation. This is one of the quietest signals of all. explaining your choices, your limits, your delays, your boundaries. Explanation feels polite, responsible, mature, but psychologically, it shifts the frame. When you explain, you imply that your actions require approval or understanding. You invite evaluation. You turn decisions into discussions, and discussions invite negotiation. Negotiation creates openings. Openings get entered. Dark psychology does not judge this. It simply observes the outcome. When you explain often, people feel entitled to influence. When you justify, people feel allowed to question. When you clarify repeatedly, people feel licensed to push. None of this is conscious. It's pattern recognition. Another overlooked signal is emotional endurance. You tolerate discomfort quietly. You absorb tension. You stay calm while others unload. You become the stable one, the strong one, the understanding one. Over time, this stability becomes a resource others rely on, and resources are drawn from. The more you endure without recalibrating the dynamic, the more others adapt to your capacity rather than your consent. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow not as evil, but as unintegrated energy. In this context, exploitation often reflects the shadow of the person being used, the part of you that avoids conflict, a part that equates harmony with safety, a part that fears withdrawal more than depletion. When these aspects remain unconscious, they shape behavior automatically, and behavior teaches others how to treat you. What makes this dynamic especially hard to break is that it doesn't feel dramatic. There is no clear violation, no moment you can point to and say, "That was wrong." Instead, there is a gradual erosion, a sense that you are expected rather than appreciated, needed rather than chosen, present rather than prioritized. And because nothing overt happened, you question yourself, you rationalize, you normalize. But psychology is precise. Repeated patterns produce predictable outcomes. Not invites it, allows it. That distinction matters. Allowance is quieter than permission, but just as powerful. The system continues until something changes. And most people try to change it at the wrong level. They confront behavior instead of altering signals. They demand respect instead of removing access. They explain boundaries instead of embodying them. This often backfires because the underlying pattern remains intact. The truth is uncomfortable but freeing. You don't need better people. You need clearer containment. When containment appears, behavior reorganizes on its own. Some people adjust upward. Others disappear. Both outcomes are data. In the next chapter, we'll explore why saying no rarely works, why boundaries fail when spoken too early, and why quiet withdrawal alters power dynamics faster than confrontation ever could. People assume boundaries fail because they are too soft or poorly communicated. But the deeper reason is timing. Boundaries spoken before internal authority exists sound like requests, not limits. When you announce a boundary while still emotionally available, the nervous system leaks permission. Others feel the hesitation underneath the words and respond to that signal instead of the sentence itself. This is why some people respect you more when you say nothing than when you explain yourself. Silence backed by regulation carries more weight than declarations made from anxiety. Boundaries are not verbal tools. They are behavioral conditions presence creates. Most people attempt to change dynamics through speech. They rehearse conversations, anticipate objections, and prepare justifications. This effort feels active, but it keeps power external. Because the moment your boundary requires explanation, it becomes negotiable. Negotiation implies equal authority, and when your internal state is uncertain, equality turns into persuasion. Persuasion invites pressure, and pressure reveals whether you can be moved. If you can, the system learns something valuable about you. Exploitation thrives on data. The more information you provide about your limits, the easier it becomes to step around them. Quiet power withholds data, not as strategy, but as stability. Withdrawal is often misunderstood as avoidance. In reality, it is a recalibration of access. When you stop offering immediate responses, emotional processing, and constant availability, people lose their reference points. They can no longer predict your reactions or rely on your presence to stabilize theirs. This uncertainty interrupts automatic behavior. Suddenly, they must self-regulate or disengage. Both outcomes restore balance because now that requires you to carry more than your share. Withdrawal does not punish others. It simply ends agreements that were never spoken aloud. Once those agreements dissolve, usage loses its foundation and effort increases. Effort demands respect or withdrawal. Another reason boundaries fail is emotional leakage. You may say no while your body says maybe. Tone, posture, eye contact, pacing, micro pauses all communicate truth faster than language. If guilt appears anywhere in your system, others sense it immediately. Guilt invites persuasion because it signals doubt, and doubt suggests reversibility. This is why hardened personalities push harder against soft refusals. They are not attacking you. They are testing the leak. Regulation closes leaks. When your nervous system settles, words align with behavior. No performance required. The refusal becomes final, not because it is loud, but because it is complete. Quiet power understands that respect is not requested. It is inferred. Inference happens when patterns shift without announcement. You stop volunteering explanations. You allow pauses. You respond when ready, not when expected. These changes feel small, but their psychological impact is immediate. People begin to adjust because the environment has changed. The same requests now meet friction. The same pressures meet stillness. Stillness reflects authority rather than defense because it does not engage the contest itself. Authority does not argue. Authority decides and lets reality reflect that decision. This is why withdrawal works or explanation fails. It removes the game. When people can no longer access you automatically, they confront themselves. Some grow resentful because their strategy stopped working. Others grow respectful because the interaction now requires effort. This sorting process is unavoidable. Quiet power does not choose outcomes. It allows truth to surface. Those who valued convenience disappear. Those who valued connection remain. This clarity is often mistaken for loss, but it is alignment in action, not theory. Alignment reduces noise. Fatigue fades because you are no longer compensating for imbalance. The body recognizes fairness even when the mind doubts it. Over time, the system stabilizes around containment alone. It is important to understand that this shift is internal, not strategic. You do not withdraw to teach lessons or punish misuse. Those motives keep you reactive. True withdrawal happens when you no longer feel the urge to correct others. Your energy turns inward toward regulation rather than management. Management seeks control. Regulation creates gravity. Gravity does not chase. It attracts or repels naturally based on mass and center. When you become centered, behavior reorganizes around you. People sense the weight of your presence without explanation. This weight discourages extraction because it requires effort to move something grounded. Silence holds. Most individuals never reach this stage because it feels uncomfortable at first. The nervous system panics when familiar roles dissolve. You may feel invisible, unnecessary, or disconnected. These sensations are transitional. They signal that old patterns are releasing. The mind often urges you to speak, explain, or re-engage. Resist that impulse. The discomfort passes. The clarity remains because it is structural, not emotional. Once the structure stabilizes, you realize nothing was lost except misuse. What remains feels quieter, cleaner, and more deliberate. This is not isolation. It is discernment functioning without force. The difference is subtle, but irreversible after awareness. Dark psychology does not moralize this process. It simply maps cause and effect. When access is constant, value decreases. When access is selective, value rises. This applies to time, attention, emotion, and presence. By shifting internally, you change the economy around you. People pay differently when the price changes. Quiet power adjusts the price without announcing the sale. You no longer discount yourself through urgency or guilt. Others either meet the new conditions or move on. Both outcomes preserve energy and dignity simultaneously. This is why the shift feels final. There is nothing left to argue or prove. Balance speaks. What ultimately stops people from using you is not a technique, but a state. When your internal environment becomes self-contained, extraction loses its reward. The system moves elsewhere because there is nothing to pull. This is the quiet ending of exploitation. Not a fight, not a declaration. Just a gradual absence of openings that once existed. You become uninteresting to misuse and magnetic to respect. This transition does not announce itself. It is noticed only in hindsight when patterns fail to repeat. You realize the pressure stopped without confrontation. The lesson integrated silently exactly where it belongs, inside regulation itself. There is a moment that arrives quietly after withdrawal stabilizes. It does not feel triumphant. It feels empty at first. The phone grows quieter. Requests slow down. Invitations change tone or disappear entirely. For many people, this phase is misinterpreted as rejection. In reality, it is recalibration. The system is adjusting to your absence of automatic compliance. Where once you were useful, now you are undefined. Undefined roles cannot be exploited easily. They require reassessment, and reassessment forces awareness. Awareness is expensive. Many avoid it. Usefulness is one of the most misunderstood currencies in human relationships. From a psychological standpoint, usefulness creates dependency when unbalanced. When you are consistently useful without boundaries, your value becomes functional rather than relational. People stop asking who you are and focus on what you provide. This shift is subtle, but its effects are profound. Respect erodes not because people dislike you, but because they no longer perceive your presence as voluntary. Voluntary presence commands respect. Obligatory presence invites consumption. When you stop being useful, you return choice to the interaction. This is where many panic and revert. The discomfort of no longer being needed triggers old fears of invisibility and abandonment. These fears are ancient. The nervous system associates usefulness with survival. If you are needed, you belong. If you are not, you risk exclusion. Dark psychology recognizes this as a primal script. It also reveals its limitation. Belonging purchased through depletion is unstable. It demands constant proof. Respect, on the other hand, emerges when your presence is optional but chosen. Optional presence signals abundance. Abundance discourages misuse because it cannot be coerced. As your behavior shifts, people respond in predictable ways. Some attempt to pull you back into the old role. They increase pressure subtly. Guilt, nostalgia, urgency. You've changed. You're distant. You used to be different. These statements are not observations. They are attempts to restore equilibrium. The system misses its former stabilizer. Do not mistake this for concern. It is adaptation. If you re-enter, the pattern resets. If you remain still, the pattern collapses. Stillness is decisive because it offers no counterforce to negotiate with. Negotiation requires engagement. Silence withdraws engagement entirely. Others respond with distance. They fade without explanation. This is not loss. It is filtration. Relationships built on access dissolve when access ends. This reveals their foundation without confrontation. You did not push anyone away. You simply stopped holding the structure together alone. Structures that require one-sided maintenance are already collapsing. You merely stepped aside and allowed gravity to complete its work. The relief that follows is often delayed, but unmistakable. Energy returns because it is no longer spent compensating for imbalance. Then there are those who recalibrate upward. They slow down. They become more respectful with your time. They listen differently. Their requests become clearer, less entitled. These individuals were not using you maliciously. They were responding to cues. When the cues changed, so did their behavior. This is the clearest evidence that quiet power works. No speech, no explanation. Just altered presence producing altered treatment. Respect arrived not because you demanded it, but because the conditions now required it. Psychologically, respect emerges when unpredictability replaces expectation. Not chaos, but sovereignty. People cannot predict your availability, your emotional labor, or your compliance. This unpredictability signals independence. Independence increases perceived value because it suggests self-sufficiency. Self-sufficient individuals are not easily manipulated because they do not rely on external validation to regulate internal states. When people sense this, they adjust instinctively. The extraction impulse weakens because there is nothing to leverage. Carl Jung's concept of individuation is relevant here. Individuation is the process of becoming whole by integrating unconscious patterns. When you withdraw from exploitation without hostility, you integrate the part of yourself that feared withdrawal. You no longer need to prove worth through service. This internal shift radiates outward. Others feel it before they understand it. You become harder to read, not because you are secretive, but because you are no longer broadcasting need. Needlessness is misinterpreted as coldness by those accustomed to access. In reality, it is containment. Containment changes how interactions feel. Conversations shorten. Exchanges become more deliberate. You no longer rush to fill silence. Silence becomes information rather than threat. People reveal themselves in response to it. Some grow uncomfortable. Others grow curious. Curiosity is respectful. It implies recognition of depth. Those who can tolerate silence without demanding reassurance tend to be capable of mutual exchange. Those who cannot often require constant output from others to stabilize themselves. Quiet power exposes this difference without labeling it. Eventually, you notice something subtle. You are no longer preoccupied with how people treat you. Attention shifts inward toward alignment rather than management. You stop tracking fairness because imbalance no longer persists. Interactions feel lighter because you are not carrying excess weight. This is the final marker that exploitation has ended. Not the absence of requests, but the absence of resentment. Resentment disappears when boundaries are no longer enforced consciously, but embodied unconsciously. Your system no longer permits what it cannot sustain. This is why the change feels irreversible. Once usefulness detaches from identity, you cannot return without awareness. Awareness blocks unconscious participation. You may choose to help, to give, to be present, but the choice remains yours. Choice is the foundation of dignity. Dignity commands respect even in silence. You are no longer reacting to the environment. The environment reacts to you, not dramatically, quietly, exactly where real power operates. There is a final shift that completes this process, and it does not arrive as strength. It arrives as neutrality. Not indifference, not detachment, but emotional neutrality toward outcomes you once tried to control. This is the moment exploitation ends permanently, because the system that once fed it no longer exists inside you. You are no longer managing perception, protecting harmony, or maintaining roles. You are simply present. Presence without agenda is the rarest form of power, because it offers nothing to manipulate. At this stage, you stop monitoring who values you. You stop measuring effort, reciprocity, or fairness. Not because those things no longer matter, but because your nervous system no longer tolerates imbalance long enough for resentment to form. The moment a dynamic feels misaligned, your body withdraws before the mind explains. This is not avoidance. It is intelligence operating without delay. Boundaries are no longer decisions. They are reflexes. Reflexes do not negotiate. This is why people can no longer use you. Usage depends on delay. Delay between discomfort and action. Delay between recognition and response. Delay between truth and movement. When delay disappears, exploitation has no entry point. There is no window where tolerance can be tested or guilt can be activated. Everything happens cleanly and early. You leave situations quietly. You respond later or not at all. You do not explain absence. Absence explains itself. What changes most is not how others treat you, but how you interpret behavior. You no longer personalize extraction. You see it as pattern, not intention. This prevents emotional hooks from forming. Hooks require meaning. When meaning dissolves, behavior loses its grip. Someone pushing no longer feels threatening or flattering. It feels mechanical. And mechanical things are easy to disengage from. You don't argue with gravity. You step aside. This neutrality often feels unfamiliar. Many mistake it for numbness. It is not numbness. Numbness blocks sensation. Neutrality allows sensation without attachment. You feel disappointment without collapse. You notice disrespect without outrage. You register misalignment without self-betrayal. This emotional maturity is not learned through affirmation. It is earned through repeated withdrawal from what costs too much. Over time, your system learns safety and restraint. That learning replaces fear. At this point, people sense something they cannot name. You are no longer reactive, and you are no longer eager. You listen without absorbing. You speak without convincing. You participate without overextending. This combination confuses those accustomed to leverage. There is nothing to pull, nothing to provoke, nothing to rush. Interactions slow down around you. Slowness discourages manipulation because it exposes intention. Intention loses power when seen clearly. Some people respond by upgrading their behavior. They become precise, respectful, and direct. These individuals were never interested in using you. They simply adapted to availability. When availability changed, they met you where you are. Others disengage entirely. They disappear without conflict because the cost-benefit ratio no longer favors extraction. This is not rejection. It is redistribution. Energy returns to where it is valued. The most important change happens internally. You stop needing to be understood. This releases you from explaining boundaries, motives, or decisions. Explanation is a subtle form of permission seeking. When permission seeking ends, authority settles. Authority here does not mean dominance. It means authorship of your own attention. You decide where it goes and why. That decision is felt by others, even when unspoken. People sense when access is granted rather than assumed. Carl Jung described individuation as becoming who you are, not who you perform. In this final stage, performance dissolves. You are no longer proving kindness, strength, or reliability. You simply are. This removes the incentive to test you. Tests are invitations to prove. When proving disappears, testing loses relevance. People stop pushing because there is no reaction to measure. Measurement requires movement. Stillness gives no data. This is why exploitation never returns once this stage stabilizes. Even if old faces reappear, the dynamic does not. They feel it immediately. Something is missing. The old openings are gone. You are familiar but inaccessible in the ways that once benefited them. They may try once, The absence of response teaches faster than confrontation ever could. Silence backed by alignment closes loops without explanation. You may notice that your circle becomes smaller, not because you reject people, but because fewer dynamics meet your internal standards. This is not isolation. It is coherence. Coherence reduces noise. Noise once disguised itself as connection. Now it feels heavy and unnecessary. You choose fewer interactions, but those interactions feel cleaner. There is no aftermath, no emotional residue. You leave conversations intact rather than depleted. This is the final truth dark psychology reveals. People only use you while you are available, in ways you cannot sustain. The moment you become self-contained, usage ends automatically. No declaration, no lesson taught. Just a quiet absence of imbalance. Power does not announce itself at this level. It settles. And once settled, it does not need to defend its position. If this landed softly instead of loudly, let it. You don't need to act on anything right now. Just notice what you no longer feel obligated to answer. Notice what no longer pulls at you the way it used to. If you want to keep developing this kind of inner authority, without confrontation, without noise, stay here. Quiet power doesn't demand respect. It becomes unreachable to misuse.